The Big Ten and the SEC have decided to form an advisory group, call it an alliance, if you will, leaving out one of their former alliance members. What does that say about the ACC and what they truly feel about them?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. I'm your host, Candace Cooper, joined by Kenton Gibbs of Locked On Wolfpack. Each and every day, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you download, subscribe to our pod on our YouTube page where you can interact with us and leave comments and join our community of ACC fans. Now, today's episode, of course, we should be talking about North Carolina and Duke, which we will get to. It is about the Blues. It's our bread and butter here around our league. But, of course, we would be remiss in this new age that we are in with realignment talks and power conferences and super allegiances and all the things to not talk about the fact that the SEC and the Big Ten are coming together to figure out how they can pretty much say F the NCAA in my eyes. And, you know, we're going to talk about that first and kick it off. But Kenton, how are you feeling on this Friday? Yeah, we feel better if I could hear you.
I feel great. Sorry for the mic being muted there, but the reality is very simple. I feel great on this Friday because I think that we're finally at a place where we can live with what's happening here. I think we can finally live with it. We're moving towards that whole singularity thing I was talking about, and that whole like, hey, there's not going to be a bunch of different conferences as we understand them right now in the near future. And boy, does this alliance head towards it. Either that or the Big Ten are those hapless idiots that, you know, they have more money than they know what to do with, but every time they keep running into the same wall. Because they did an alliance last time. If I do remember, the members of the alliance were the Big 12, Pac-12, and ACC, correct?
Yes. Big 10, Pac-12, ACC.
Yeah, Big 10, Pac-12, and ACC. Mm-hmm. And who did the Big 10 steal those teams from?
Yeah, the Pac-12 became the Pac-2. But let's just be clear, it's not an alliance. It's an advisory group, okay? So it's different this time.
Yeah, they've learned their lesson, yeah.
The lesson is we're the only two making money around here, so maybe let's F everybody else. But the statement from the SEC saying the Big Ten and the SEC today announced the formation of a joint advisory group of university presidents, chancellors, and athletic directors to address the significant challenges facing college athletics and the opportunities for betterment of the student-athlete experience. These challenges, including but not limited to recent court decisions, pending litigation, a patchwork of state laws, and complex governance proposals, compel the two conferences to take a leadership role in developing solutions for a sustainable future of college sports. So it's on these two because they called the other three Power 5 conferences and said, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to make sure we get it together.
Other two Power 4 conferences. Pac-12 don't exist no more.
It does exist. It technically has two. It's still the Pac-12.
How?
In theory.
But the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore.
That's not a thing.
It's definitely a thing.
It's still a thing until we start off a new season where people kick off and we have all these different teams playing each other. They're still the Pac-12. They're the Pac-2.
I'm sorry, but nobody is calling Granny that's on hospice to ask what she want to do with the family money. That's crazy.
I'm just letting you know that until we kick off, we're still a unit.
Okay. Again, I have never heard of anybody going up to somebody that's like not on life support, looking to make a recovery. That's just like, hey, they on their way out. They transitioning.
I know it's over. It was a joke, but it just didn't land, and that's fine. But of the two, okay, you got it. You got it. Okay. So two other conferences weren't being pulled in order to have these conversations. And I think that is very telling. So the Big 12, the ACC, of those remaining power conferences are not being considered for advising, What does that say, considering how much weight people like Florida State feel like they pull, UNC feel like they pull, Clemson when it comes to football, and they can't even get a phone call. They can't even get a, hey, this is jacking up the student athlete experience.
Well, number one, these two conferences, it's a lot like how for years. So for those of you who are not as cultured in well versed in hip hop, there was a beef a long time ago between two rappers by the name of Jay-Z and Nas. Okay. And everybody felt like Nas won the beef, but Jay-Z, who was more popular, then released his albums on the same day as Nas every time Nas released an album. Now, mind you, Jay-Z's more popular. So what happened? He basically ruined his release every single time. Why am I saying that, right? This move is their version of that. This is the Big Ten and SEC's version of that. What do you mean, Ken? Well, let me explain. What they're doing is they're saying, the only conferences that matter are speaking, and the rest of you, I mean, I don't know what you want from us, but you're just not relevant enough to have a strong hold in this conversation. So what does that do to a team like a Florida State? Or Florida State's already got a foot out the door. Let's just be honest. What does that do to a Clemson, to a UNC, to, for basketball purposes, of course, even though basketball ain't the driver of all this movement, a Duke and all that good stuff, right? You say to yourself, well, hold on now. This ball game looks a little different than we'd imagine, because why are we not included in those conversations? And so now you start to think to yourself, do we need to look around and look at exit options? But in all seriousness, I mean, these alliances or these advisory committees and all that, good for you, but we all know what's happening here. Again, this is a whole lot of nothing.
What is happening here? Go ahead and tell people.
We're moving towards football separating from the NCAA. That's what's happening. The NCAA was founded upon the principle, the main pillar, the low bearing wall of the house is amateurism. That's the low bearing wall. That's what allows you to not pay the players and all that. Except players they're very much so employees, and even beyond that, everybody in college athletics, especially college football, is getting paid except the players. You know what I mean? Like, they're getting paid directly from the universities except the players. That was only going to stand but for so long. Like, now that NIL came out, you open Pandora's box. You can't put that jar of worms back in the can. You know, you're looking at a tough situation there, and so we're headed towards that moment where the floodgates fully open, and it becomes, hey, these guys are employees of your university, or these guys are attending as students, but they're also a separate, kind of contractor deal or whatever that looks like. We're headed towards that. And people just don't want to be honest about that, or it upsets them a little bit, makes them a little uneasy for whatever reason. So, but the reality is every move that's being made by the major conferences, and I don't mean just the SEC and Big Ten in this regard, all the moves by all the major conferences point out that that's what's happening. The Pac-12 didn't get destroyed because they didn't like each other. It got destroyed because of money. And you can't tell me that amateurism is the driving force when money now has Cal and Stanford having to go up to Syracuse, New York to play games yearly. That's just the reality.
Well, my biggest thing is, okay, if this is only applicable to football, then what is the state of affairs for how you've already jacked up, these new conferences, right? Does everyone go back to their originals, states, hunting grounds? And if you're a part of non-football related things, do you just, who do you play if this were to become so? What do you do about NIL deals that are very much lucrative for your women athletes? What does that entail, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good question. And that's a question that at this point in time, us trying to provide an answer would just be pure speculation, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we could give that guess. My most educated guess of what will happen is that the conferences will remain as they are for the most part for the Olympic sports and all that good stuff. Because, I found out this very recently. Olympic sports apparently already do have slightly different conferences in certain situations where it's like, your school has a hockey team, but nobody else in your conference does, or something along those lines, or whatever the case may be, with water polo, other sports like that. the reality is, and as unfair as it is, a lot of sports will get lumped into that group. A lot of sports will get lumped into those groups of, hey, buddy, you don't make any money. So you go over here with the non-money makers, and the money makers are going to play by a very different set of rules.
Well, that just feels that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I think, as someone who had a non-revenue sport experience, it can really affect and jack up the trajectory of many people's lives. But we'll talk about that. Next weekend is Super Bowl Sunday. We want to make sure that you are in on the betting action by visiting our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snack, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. You can get which player scored touchdown, how many points will be scored, and more for Super Bowl 58. New customers join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book of the NFL. So as I mentioned, I think it jacks up the student athlete experience because if you're a non-revenue sport, a lot of what you depend on is these revenue sports to fund what you do year in and year out. But beyond that, I think that it's not, if you're talking about student athlete experience, you've already jacked it up by the travel situation, by how all these realignments, and there's no sort of structure. So I blame the NCAA, right, for not providing structure and getting ahead of this and not having forethought. But I also blame people like Jim Phillips, who cannot seem to understand that he is behind the 8 ball and there is almost no recovery at this point. And once again, releasing those statements, not saying anything about it, not doing your due diligence. Like, there's no point of calling the Big 12. We're going to form our own advisory group for what?
The thing that I look at here is the question I have: what happens with Title IX as that relates to this? Because let's be brutally honest here. We're not talking about women playing football anytime soon.
Right.
That's not happening.
Well, women do play football. We're not talking about
I'm talking about like college, at the college level, to where like there are people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to follow around high school kids and like talk about where they're going. Even if little girls and young women in droves started playing football, that market would not be that right off bat, right? I think we can agree that.
Sure.
With that in mind, I'm very curious as to what happens. What happens in terms of, like you said, there are many programs that count on that type of revenue to kind of get them over, and they count on revenue from football and basketball and any other revenue generating sports they have on campus to get them over. And I know I can already see the arguments being made for why it's not fair to football to have to fund all these sports, or why it's not fair to this group or that group to fund all these sports. But the way I see this thing,
that's stupid as hell, because what is capitalism? But go ahead.
But that's the thing. It's going, the argument that I think, and again, this is pure speculation. This is not, I tell y'all when I know something and I tell y'all when I think something. Right now, this is me thinking out loud, so bear with me. I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying, when we head towards that singularity, how do you possibly pay the players and the administrators, and you pay the players equitably, and you still have enough money left over to fund your swim team, your rifle team, your gymnastics team, your wrestling team, depending on the university,
your music program, your arts programs, all the different things that you fund for a public university that has to split the pot. There's plenty of trickle-down effect that is going to boil down to. We got to make sure that Dabo Swinney has a job, but I'm so sorry that we cannot provide this, major for you, but, butts and seats. It's silly.
I would hope that the endowment is enough to take care of all that. I would hope, and as much as they charging kids,
I don't know. You don't know about what the economy is looking at like right now, but times are a little bit hard, a little bit.
I'm with you when you're right, and I'm not against you here. Okay, I'm not against you on this one at all. I'm very intrigued to see how this shakes out, because obviously, if we're going back to the ACC specific angle of this, the advisory committee just slapped y'all upside the head, but also the advisory committee is also driving us to a place that
they just sunned us a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If we're talking in terms of where I'm from, you just got slapped upside the head and sent to the store for some Fritos. You had to make the store run for the heavy hitters. That's what just happened there. Okay. It's very embarrassing. It's very embarrassing, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I would look at this if I'm Jim Phillips, and I don't care if you're not the rah-rah, fiery type of guy. You need to do something, or else all the universities who are de facto the stakeholders in this company per se, in this conference, the stakeholders in this conference, they need to get somebody else in there. They need to do something to say, this guy has been derelict in his responsibilities. He has not taken the reins. He has not driven us in a direction that I can look at and say, I trust his leadership, even if I can't get out. Even if we in the 360 death row records deal with the grant of rights, that's fine, but his ass got to go.
I just would like to know, from a Notre Dame standpoint, being independent, how is that going to work out for you when you're halfway in the ACC and halfway not? And if the ACC doesn't exist, are you going to be begging and pleading and knocking on the Big Ten and SEC's door for matchups, or how is that going to work?
Notre Dame is like all those memes that women keep talking about. I'm independent, but I still need my man. I'm indespoiled. They're that, right? Mm-hmm. Like when it comes to football, they don't need nobody. They are a strong, lonely. I don't need nobody. I can do this on my own. Me and NBC, we could take on the world. Mm-hmm. And all the other sports, hey,
yeah,
I'm so glad that you have us.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Crazy, right? We'll end it there and talk about some basketball, but I'm sure you all also have thoughts towards what's going on, and we'll love to hear them as we move along through what could be the last ride for us. You know, we are hired by Jimmy P, and if there is no ACC, then I hate to break it to you, there might not be a Locked On ACC. So who knows?
I hear you talking about we a lot. Oh, you speak French now, because if we hired by Jimmy P, my check's a little light, Jimmy. My check's a little light. And if you're ever going to fight for us, the least you could do is come heavy check. Okay?
I'm just trying to tell you. All right. Coming up on Saturday, the biggest matchup of the year, part 1, Blue Bloods, if you do like basketball around here, which a lot of us do. UNC and Duke will head to Chapel Hill, 8 miles down the road, and take on each other for what will be a top 10 matchup. Two programs that have 4 losses between them and are trying to find a win. Duke coming off a win against Virginia Tech, North Carolina coming off a loss against Georgia Tech. And for all intents and purposes, it's -4.5 right now. I think that's just a little bit of home field advantage. But we all know how these things work. It doesn't matter what the records are. It's going to be a dog fight. I talked on the radio today and said it's going to be a blowout, but we all know full well that's not the case. This is going to have to be Armando Bacot's best game. Has to be. And I say this because I would hope Duke knows they're going to have to lock down RJ. Mm-hmm. So if no RJ, what is North Carolina? I'm not quite sure I know the answer to that still this far along in the season.
You know, this game is so interesting because you're looking at two teams that are obviously, it's a rivalry. They hate each other. You know, the Battle of the Blues. It's a big deal down here. Not going to lie to you. Didn't know how big of a deal it was until I came to ACC country. And I'm like, oh, okay. These schools really don't like each other. All right, I get it. I can dig it. I like it. With that being said, that kind of sandpaper element to this game, I think it plays more into the hands of Duke than North Carolina because – you know, North Carolina thrives on getting into the paint and drawing fouls. They thrive on that. And I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. I'm not saying that they're James Harden out there with it because in college you don't get those same types of fouls.
Who is drawing the fouls? Is it RJ or is it Armando? Because Armando hasn't really been
if we're going to sit up here and play like Elliot Cadeau and RJ Davis don't put up a massive amount of points from the free throw line, I can get up and leave now. Okay?
That's what you're saying? RJ only gets his majority of his points from the free throw line?
You see how she put words in my mouth? I specifically said that part of their game is getting to the line. And Candace said, you say that they get a majority of their points from there. That's not what I said at all. RJ, absolutely not.
Part of their strategy is getting to the line.
Yes, it's part of their strategy, yeah.
Okay.
Getting to the line, getting downhill, forcing defenders to follow. And again, I'm not
crazy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that they're James Harden level with it, that they're, NBA level, Embiid level with it, where it's like, I don't care what I got to do. I'll flop, scream, and flail and do all that till I get it. I'm not saying it's that bad, but that's a part of their game. Mm-hmm. And the problem with a rough sandpaper game, that course, hey, we gonna battle it for, no pun intended, but we're going to duke it out and we're going to see what happens here. It doesn't lend itself to that, because then refs are more likely to swallow their whistles. And that puts you.
You're blaming RJ for the Georgia Tech loss, but I'll keep it there. I will say, for Kyle Filipowski, for Ryan Young, this could be the game where you remind the folks of who you guys are.
And that was where I was going with this.
It took you a long time to
get there. They have better depth, and they do not rely on fouls being called in the same way.
Boy, you lie here on this app today, but go ahead.
You're telling me that UNC is deeper than Duke, not more talented. I'm saying depth-wise. If you had
depth in what way?
Like if you had to say, hey, we're going to go on, instead of the game being decided by who has the most points at the end, we're going to average together how much, we're going to average together how many your third leading scorer through your sixth leading scorer scored. And that's going to give you plus 3 points for every point they score. Like that type of deal.
Name the Blue Devils that do that. Besides Filipowski.
Okay.
Proctor.
That's my point. Beyond Filipowski and Proctor, you also have Roach, who is supposed to be doing it and scoring that out. You gonna tell me that Roach hasn't improved offensively this year? We just talked about his shooting stroke improving last episode. You're making me compliment Blue Devils. This is crazy.
So streaky.
This is crazy.
He's so streaky, Kenton. Are we doing this today?
Yeah. Oh my God. What?
Child.
In the words of SZA, I can't see, I'm blind. Because what?
Okay. All right. Candace. You put them three against Baycott, Davis, and Cadeau?
No, but that's Candace.
Trimble?
That is my point.
Harrison Ingram?
If you take, and that's my point. If you take star for star in terms of scoring, you take your 1 and 2 against 1 and 2. I think that is a very close, not really close matchup that favors UNC by a lot. Okay. That is what I would say. Okay. But when you get into that 3 to 6 to 7th guy range, and you say, who do we trust to score more? Duke's 3 through 7, UNC's 3 through 7. Candace, I know that's your alma mater.
Seth Trimble, Cormac Ryan? All right. Jalen Withers, I give you that one. I don't know why the boy got here. I don't know how he got here. I give you that one. But everybody else?
I love Harry Ingram's game. Love it. Love his game. Love his game. Anybody who knows me knows.
He needs to learn how to put it in the hoop. I give you that.
That's what I'm saying. That
was one person.
Their star players star in their role, but I'm saying in a game like this, you need the other guys to show up and produce offensively if it's going to be that rough, grinded out game.
Sometimes
that's what I'm saying.
You're Dennis Rodman. Sometimes you're Denny Rod.
Okay? And that's what Candace, what I'm saying.
You need him to be Scottie Pippen this time.
Exactly. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Somebody else. People forget there were multiple games in the playoffs where Jordan was having his struggles and Pippen stepped up and carried the load and carried them over the hump. That's all I'm saying. That's what I'm not saying.
Who's going to need to carry the hump for both teams? Who needs it?
So if I was to say, hey, there needs to be a guy on each team to get it done, for UNC, again, outside of the big names, for UNC it's obvious. Elliot Cadeau, brother, it's time. It's time. Even if you don't do it with your scoring, you need to distribute and find guys other than the stars, because that's going to be important in this game. Okay. And on the other side, I hate to say it, but Jeremy Roach, you got to play like that alleged NBA player. You got to show up. You got to show up, brother. You got to do your thing. Because if you're saying
player is crazy, but go ahead.
If you're saying, hey, Filipowski, you're going to have to give us 40 for us to get a win, you're not winning this game.
A lot of people are saying it's McCain who has to show up. It's a TikTok man.
Okay. McCain may shake his hips, but he can shake a defender or two as well. Okay.
When he feels like it. I need consistency. I don't need streaky. I don't need a sometimes Z defender.
And here's the deal, right? Again, beyond the stars, and we would agree that the stars for Duke are Proctor, Filipowski. Those are the two people look at and say, hey, those are the big names. Beyond them, if this game is that physical, now if it's a track meet,
I don't know.
If it's a track meet in there, yeah, that works out. That works out for UNC because it gives your stars a chance to start. It gives your stars a chance to attack downhill before they can get their defense set up. You love to see that. That's what you want to get going. But if it's that grit and grind, it's nasty, it's physical, it's tough, it's the battle of the blues type of thing. It's the battle of the black and blues when you leave this thing type of game. Then again, that to me, that favors Duke.
I would hope that North Carolina defends Chapel Hill, defends, it's Baycott's last time. It has to be. I will call the admin office myself and ensure that he has to graduate. Ain't no more degrees to get, okay? I need to see Jalen Washington actually be the star that I know he is to be. You got to do it for Montrose. You got to do it for him, right? This is the game where you just hold it down, POP. Like, it has to be the one. And I feel like this could be it.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I think that this should be an exciting game. And beyond the national implications of this, with, of course, the two top 10 teams going at this thing. If Duke wins this game, they take possession of first place in the ACC. North Carolina slides to second, and vice versa. Or I'm sorry, not vice versa. UNC stays on top if they win this game. So I think there's a lot. There's a lot to see. There's a lot to kind of have going on in this game. There's so many storylines. And you've talked about the coaching, the difference between how Shire is treated versus Huber. Well, hey, Hubie, if you're trying to make your case to get some heat on him,
but North Carolina would be 9-2, and Duke would be 8-2, but they would still be ahead.
So they'd have a half game lead. Okay, they'd have a half game. I apologize. They'd have a half game lead.
It's okay. I wanted to make sure I was correct. You good?
Oh, you're right. You're right. Our fans sure like to tell us when we're wrong. So I appreciate y'all for it. That's not a criticism. I appreciate y'all keeping us honest.
All right. That's how you know we're getting better, because people actually are tuning in. Okay.
Absolutely. And Slam Tanner told us he believes in the Tiger Shuck and Jive offense. I said, well, we gonna see. We gonna see. I might have you on to eat a Baconator with Candace. Everybody getting clogged arteries around here.
Other great matchups, if you are an ACC basketball junkie, to look out for: Virginia Tech and Miami. Going to be a great one, in my opinion. I think Miami needs to keep their ball rolling, figure something out. They need a hope and a prayer, something. They got to make something shake. Virginia Tech also is one of those teams on the cusp, trying to get that momentum going into tournament time. Virginia and Clemson, arguably the next best game after Duke and North Carolina, because Virginia, you right there. You want to go ahead and get the dub so you can be in the conversation for potentially having the regular season ACC title. Clemson holding on by a thread, trying to get into that tournament for the NCAA. So that one's going to need to be big.
And I just want to put this in perspective. All of these games do have importance to the conference, and there are many good games going on. But just for perspective on how big the Battle of the Blues is, all of the other games combined, the lowest ticket price that you could get, if you bought the lowest ticket available according to ESPN.com every single ACC game that wasn't the Battle of the Blues, you would be coming out of about $105-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. The lowest available ticket for the Battle of the Blues, $388. $388. So just letting you in there. But there are very many matchups that are going to be important to the conference. I hate to be a homer, but NC State and Georgia Tech, that NC State's tournament hopes are fading quickly. They're fading fast. They're almost dead. I talked about hospice earlier. They're one day away from saying, just let me go. I'm tired of fighting. And yet you still sit here with some having NC State not on the first 4 teams out, but the second 4 teams out, or in consideration categories. And Georgia Tech and Damon Stoudemire, again, they are not a tournament team this year, but they're playing at a level they've shown multiple times they can beat anybody. They can compete with anybody, but the question is how mature is that team to be locked in and show up for what they need. You talked about Virginia Tech and Miami already, but the game I got my eye on, Syracuse and Wake Forest. Talk to me. What's going on? What's really going to happen in Winston-Salem? Because Syracuse has shown us that they are going to compete. They are going to play hard and all that. And Wake Forest has just been up and down and all around. And you were like, oh, Monsanto's back. He's going to be great. And then it's like, but not really. And it's like, oh, what? Wake Forest is good. They're on that precipice, too, of like they're in consideration by many in terms of tournament talks and all that. What are we doing here as a conference? Who's going to separate themselves to make us more than a 2-bid conference? There are many games that will help determine that picture for us coming up tomorrow.
Absolutely agree. I think that ultimately, we have to keep trekking along as if things are going to happen, because they do. And as we have more updates, we'll certainly provide them for you. But you don't want to miss out on any of the Saturday matchups, but the Sunday matchups as well for the young ladies. I think women's basketball certainly has had some good ones. North Carolina, NC State won last night, was one to see, must-see TV. And as much as people don't like us talking about it,
never gonna learn. She ain't never gonna learn, child.
I wish we could do a whole segment and talk about her and her foolishness, but I ain't got time.
She's still calling that Jim Small. Get a win there, lady. Get a win. Damn.
I would love to have a great weekend and hope you guys do the same. So come back on Monday so we can recap the Battle of Blues. We can talk about whether or not we're still a conference and how much we're going to get paid from Jimmy Phillips. So hope you guys have a good one. Please be safe and smart out there. For Candace Cooper and Kenton Gibbs,